This program is dedicated to the men and moments that have made the University of Dayton basketball program great. We will relive nearly 4 decades of Flyer basketball history that has enriched the lives of the players and the fans. Who would have thought in 1947, when the University of Dayton hired a no-nonsense taskmaster from a small Ohio town, that the fabled tradition of University of Dayton basketball had been born? When Tom Blackburn took the head coaching job part-time for $1,200 a year, not even he could have envisioned what was to transpire, that the modern era of University of Dayton basketball had arrived. In the following 37 years, Flyer teams would play in 9 NCAA and 17 National Invitational tournaments. For years, the National Invitational Tournament overshadowed the NCAAs, and in the decade of the 50s, no team was more dominant in the NITs than Blackburn's Flyers. They reached the finals 5 times in 7 appearances. As Coach Blackburn stated, it was the 1951 victory in the NIT semifinals against St. John's that put the University of Dayton basketball program in the big leagues. If the St. John win unlocked the door to the big leagues, it was the shocking upset in the spring of 1953 of the then undefeated and #1 ranked Seton Hall Pirates that was to keep it open forever. The winning tradition, born in the 50s, flourished in the 60s when the Flyers earned 8 postseason berths, winning the NIT in 62 and 68 and placing second in the NCAA tournament in 1967. Add 5 postseason tournament bids in the 70s, and the University of Dayton basketball program had established itself as a national power. Having built this winning tradition, it seems almost sacrilegious that a triple overtime second-round loss to UCLA in the 1974 NCAA tournament is considered by most Flyer fans as Dayton's greatest game. With over 30 years of rich tradition behind him, Coach Don Donaher looked into the 80s and continued to prove the Dayton Flyer program is one of the best in the country. Donaher's teams were invited to postseason tournaments in 5 of the first 7 years, twice being stopped by the eventual national champion. In 1984, the Flyers wore the Cinderella tag, capturing the hearts of fans across the country. They won their first 3 NCAA tournament games before running into the Patrick Ewing-led Georgetown Hoyas. In 1985, the Flyers bowed out in the first round of Villanova. Dayton finished the regular 50-51 season with a 24-4 record and received its first invitation to the prestigious National Invitational Tournament. For the first time in its history, Dayton joined college basketball's elite at the Garden in New York. The Flyers breezed by Lawrence Tech in the opener and outlasted Arizona in the second round to earn the right to play #1 seeded St. John's in the semis. In overtime, St. John's jumped ahead, but the Flyers, led by Chuck Grigsby, broke away and won 69-62. Don Meineke, Chuck Grigsby, Pete Boyle, Junior Norris, Dick Campbell, Gene Joseph, Vaughn Taylor, and Gene Hickey had vaulted Dayton into the big time. The 1951-52 edition of the Dayton Flyers returned a solid core of starters and promised to be another fine season. The Flyers finished the regular season 25-4 and received a bid to the NIT. On opening night, UD handed hometown NYU an 81-66 defeat, as Meineke scored 30, Norris 10, and 2 freshmen, Jack Salee and John Horan, scored 17 and 11. Dayton's next opponent was St. Louis. The all-senior club owned one of the 2 defeats suffered by Adolph Rupp's powerful Kentucky Wildcats. It would take superb team performance for the Flyers to reach the semifinals, and the 68-58 victory was just that, as the Flyers nailed 50% from the field and pulled down 67 rebounds. In addition to balanced scoring from all 5 starters, a new hero emerged for Dayton, sophomore Jim Paxson. In the semifinal game, the Flyers defeated St. Bonaventure 69-62, sparked by a 25-point effort by Monk. The victory was Dayton's 20th in a row, too short of the all-time NCAA record held by Kentucky. Since St. Louis and Duquesne had already been eliminated from the NIT, Dayton was the only remaining team that had a chance to win both the NIT and NCAA. A packed house was on hand for the NIT finals against LaSalle, who was led by Tom Gola. LaSalle's game plan was to shut down Monk Meineke by denying him the ball, and they succeeded, holding Monk to a personal tournament low of 13 points. LaSalle's 10-point spurt in the third period gave them an advantage which turned out to be the difference in the game. Monk Meineke walked away with tournament scoring honors. The Flyers added another victory a week later in the NCAA to set a UD record of 28 wins in a single season. Although Flyer fans were watching many of their all-time greats for the last time, the group of newcomers assured them UD was on the map to stay. The 52-53 season featured one of Dayton's all-time greatest victories. Seton Hall brought its All-American, Walter Dukes, near All-American Richie Reagan, as well as their unanimous #1 ranking, to a packed UD fieldhouse. The Flyers, who were led by Jim Paxson's 23 and John Horan's 20, went with their starting five the entire game. Don Donaher, who scored 14, not only scored the first and last bucket of the game, but also broke a 56-all deadlock with a three-point play that sealed the victory. Solid performances from Jack Salee and Chris Harris helped their running mates to stop what was then the longest single-season college win streak at 27. Blackburn's 53-54 edition of the Flyers contained two ingredients that gave the Flyer fans hopes of another great season. The first, experience, with Harris, Donaher, Salee, and Horan returning for another campaign. The second was a 7-foot sophomore named Bill Ewell. The Flyers had a great campaign. They finished 25-7 and joined the nation's best in the NIT for the third time in 4 years. The 54-55 Flyers had a string of impressive victories, including 2 overtime wins against national powerhouse Louisville. The first game was played in the Dayton Fieldhouse. Louisville led the entire game and increased the lead to 8 early in the second half. Deadly free throw shooting by Jack Salee and a tip by Horan after a missed foul shot cut Louisville's lead to 6 with 16-12 remaining. The Cardinals were hot, but outside shots by Al Sicking and Salee kept Dayton in the game. With 5 minutes remaining, Sicking's layup brought the Flyers to within 4. Jack Salee hit from outside and inside down the stretch to close the gap to 1. With 2:49 to play, John Horan's strong inside move gave Dayton their first lead. Louisville answered, but Horan responded with a turnaround banker off the glass. A Cardinal free throw with seconds remaining sent the game into overtime. Louisville played cautiously, looking for the open shot. After a Cardinal miss, the Flyers wasted no time as Salee fed John Horan inside, and John delivered the game-winning basket. Captain Chris Harris added 2 free throws to ice the victory. Final score, UD 71, Louisville 67. The Flyers ended the 54-55 regular season, winning 12 straight, en route to a 23-3 mark, earning yet another invitation to the Garden. After winning their opener, the Flyers beat St. Francis and their All-American, Maurice Stokes. Duquesne University's 2 All-Americans proved to be too much for the Flyers as they returned to Dayton with their 3rd NIT runner-up trophy. John Horan was a near-unanimous choice on both the AP and UPI All-NIT team. Bill Ewell and Jack Salee were named to the second team. Chris Harris received an honorable mention. In the 1955-56 season, the Flyers were only 9 points short of a perfect season, losing twice to Louisville and once to Duquesne. There were many impressive victories against formidable opponents along the way, including second-ranked Utah, Cincinnati, Xavier, Memphis State, Loyola, and Kentucky. In the UK game, 4th-ranked Dayton hit from all over and led all the way. Kentucky narrowed the gap to 61-57 at the 10-minute mark, but Ray Derringer, who led all Flyer scorers, drove underneath. Bockhorn and Palmer scored, and the lead was back to 10. From that point on, it was all Flyer offense, as 4 starters finished in double figures. Derringer, 25, Ewell, 20, Bockhorn, 17, Paxson, 16. It was in the Kentucky Invitational that Dayton handed Kentucky its worst home court defeat in 20 years, 89-74. After the game, Adolph Rupp called the Flyers one of the finest teams he had seen through the years. And that big fellow Ewell couldn't be far behind Bill Russell. After the season, UD was once again honored with an invitation to the National Invitational Tournament in New York. The Flyers' first opponent was Xavier. With Xavier leading 44-35 and Bill Ewell in foul trouble, Coach Blackburn sent Al